This is the Leap Tech Online 2-player Bartop arcade, completely 3D printed with a Raspberry Pi, 22-inch monitor, and powered by RetroPie and Emulation Station. I 3D printed this for two reasons. One is for my kids to try some old school arcade games, but also because not too long ago, kids, parents, and I went to Pastimes Arcade in Girard, Ohio.
My name is Rob Burke, and currently I'm the Guinness Book of Records holder for the most pinball machines. And the reason why I have so many of these games is during COVID, I had nothing to do. People say, hey, you got...
It was awesome, and I highly recommend it since I believe it has the largest pinball collection in the world. My mom loves old arcade games and has been caught bragging about the full-size main machine I built as a teenager, but since got rid of. It's time to bring it back, and big enough so that we can get some two-player versus games going. Maybe a version 2 can add some Sinden light guns for some Area 51 and Time Crisis, which I've probably spent a small fortune on as a kid. This machine uses about 7 kilograms of filament and 220 hours of printing if you don't screw up. Some AliExpress hardware, dozens of 3mm screws and heated inserts. I made a lot of mistakes and have some lessons learned if you are going to try this yourself. Project files are optimized for a 256mm print bed like the P1S, but thankfully I have quite a few large printers. But the week-long print time was a fraction of the time I spent swearing at this while learning a simplified version of Linux as a Windows user. I had to make some sacrifices to make the birthday deadline for my mom, so let's talk about that. 8 kilograms of filament, an unknown amount of hours later, I have 18 buckets labeled by each project file you'll be printing in order. Each of those project files is a single major component like the bottom, sides, audio panel, button panel, monitor mount, bezel, etc. I made a mistake and printed the entire side black and figured it'd still look good with her favorite color, which is yellow, just a bit more muted. In fact, it does look great in a dimly lit room. Each object is oriented so that the face you'll see is against the print bed for a reliably samey looking texture. And I think it's a good idea if you have one or more identical printers, which I do not. My Snapmaker U1 has a BQ Frostbite plate with a coarser texture. My Creality K2 Plus has the BQ Glacier plate, which is a smoother texture than the Frostbite plate. Finally, my Bamboo H2C still has a stock PEI plate with actually a little glue residue I genuinely forgot was there. The yellow and white PLA look fine, but the black shiny PETG looks awful. Don't mix filament types like I did, use a matte plastic, and really try to use the same type of bed texture for all your prints, or at least sign one printer to one color. Organization is key here, and I highly recommend printing the dowels in white, because if you use black dowels in the yellow or white pieces, you'll see them. Also, print a bunch of extras, because you'll need them too. I'm putting these pieces in labeled bins, but if you're less organized, I highly recommend following the suggestion of assembling each piece before continuing on to the next. Do you need your own 3D printing or a custom input device for an arcade like I have here? Then you'll need custom PCBs from PCBWay. You'll upload your design, select options like color, material, size, and many more. Production starts in just a few days with fast shipping. PCBWay offers additional products like PCB assembly, PCB design, CNC machining, and more. Use my link in the description below to save $5 off your first order. These bins were like $1 each at Walmart, and I highly recommend binning each piece as it completes because there are so many pieces, and even just the walls are a puzzle. However, they are smartly designed. You don't need the headache from disorganization. There were no instructions online that I found, and there were some suggestions on the project page. The video is for a single player machine, so it wasn't that helpful. Luckily, it was very intuitively designed, and I got by without instructions although you will need to listen to my advice. The bottom went together without any drama, and if you're not sure how the pieces are oriented, then pay attention to the Leapcade writing and make sure it goes together in the way you can read it. I recommend super glue, especially on the structural parts. Glue is cheap, no excuses. A quick dot on the dowels will keep things together. The walls, oh man, the walls. Lay out the pieces to make sure you have the orientations correct. And again, the pieces only fit one way, so use the outside profile and the circles to help align everything. Again, I put some glue on the dowels and used a rubber mallet to knock everything into place. My first warning is to not use dowels on areas that have a rectangular indent, because that will be filled on final assembly. If you glue in the dowels there, you'll be cutting and grinding to make pieces fit like I had to do. Just don't do that in the first place. I did all my heated inserts after the assembly, but honestly, you should do them now. On the sides, you have two where it says CPU, but you absolutely need to install the speakers with their heated inserts before moving on. Once assembled, you won't have access to the top two screws on the speaker. I had to jerry-rig it, but if I did that installation now, like you're about to, I wouldn't have had that problem. The monitor mount also has text on it and should be in the correct orientation. I think if you install it upside down, you'll be okay, but may have to design a bezel yourself, which I had to do for other reasons we'll get to later. Bottom panel installation wasn't that intuitive. Unlike everything else, I had some bonus supports, triangles, which I was able to glue in place and make a shelf for it to sit on. Actually, not sure if this is what I was supposed to do, but it happened. I do know the white triangle on the bottom should be there to center the button panel. Continue putting everything together, glue it in place, and make sure you have access to everything later. The button panel should stay removable. With it assembled, this was where I actually started to breathe a sigh of relief. Until I found out I installed the power panel backwards, but the hinges on the bottom are a problem for future me. First is the power, where I took a power strip and cut the wire, leaving about 12 inches to work with. I peeled back the cover, exposing a little bit of hot, neutral, and ground. If you're not in the USA, then you might be on your own here, but I'll put up a diagram I found and also clarified. Use part of that extra wire you have for the plug to wire up the switch, and I added some electrical tape to make things a little safer, although I don't recommend licking it anyway. With a power strip in here and a 10 amp fuse, we can just plug in everything else, making that super easy. My Raspberry Pi 4 had a micro HDMI port, so I had to get a special cable for that, but I believe the Pi 3 has a full HDMI port. If your audio is already set up like I said to do, but didn't so far, then plug that in to the monitor and test that it at least does something when it's turned on. The button panel was easy but tedious, a lot of heated inserts, so be patient, and special mounts for the input boards, but once screwed in, pop the buttons in and just start wiring them up. It doesn't matter what goes where unless you insist on using a labeled port like turbo, but you really shouldn't. Just use the unlabeled ports. The joystick I got wrong the first time because the plug into it was upside down, and only my up axis was being registered. If this happens to you, flip that connection and try again. That solved my problem on both joysticks. While I didn't have the issue on the button board, the smaller buttons that go under the monitor were too tight, so I dremeled it out a bit, and with less pressure on the sides of the buttons, they were nice and clicky again. Speaking of, if you didn't know the buttons are different sizes, they are, and the smaller ones go under the monitor. I also had an issue where player 1 was assigned player 2's controls and vice versa. Without a script you can get online, the default behavior is that player 1 gets the first controller on the USB list. That means I just swapped my USB cables on the Raspberry Pi, and that fixed it right up. The RetroPie website has excellent instructions on how to download an image, write it to USB, and get it onto your Raspberry Pi, so do that. I didn't have any issues with this other than a longer first boot, so be patient. On startup, you'll be asked to set up your inputs, and yes, there is some more excellent documentation I will link on the screen. However, again, if only one input on the joystick works, then flip your cable around. If your players are switched, then switch the USB cables. I also didn't really find an order of buttons that I liked, but it's a good idea to write down what button is what letter, like A, B, X, Y, L, R. Again, good documentation on the website, but the SD card will not have a folder for ROMs. The easiest way for me is to source a USB stick, plug it into the Raspberry Pi, and it'll create the folders for you. You can transfer over the network too, but that's on you to figure out. After about 10 seconds, move that USB stick to your PC and navigate to your target ROM system folder. Copy over your new ROMs and eject. Flip it over 3 times trying to plug it back into your Raspberry Pi. The ROMs are copied over on startup, so restart if your arcade is currently on. After a slightly longer startup, you should see all your new games in the game list and go ahead and test them out. Would I do it again? Actually, yeah, but with a smaller 1-player machine. Another 2-player machine would look a lot better with my lessons learned, and maybe the kids would love playing it. I would probably use Windows too, and that isn't a knock on Linux, it's just that I know Windows. I was lucky this time I had a spare Raspberry Pi 4 I use as an old Pi hole. I had to cut the build short so it wasn't so late, so I have a few things left unfinished I need your help with. These center around my lack of Linux experience, but I have the home, save, load, and power buttons unused. If you know of a way to use these features without hotkeys, I would be so incredibly grateful. Thank you for watching, like and subscribe if you liked it. I enjoy doing build videos like this, but they aren't nearly as popular as say unboxing and testing videos, so check out other build videos too.
Oh.